I'm going to go to the brief motivation of the work which we do, why we do. If you look at the general trends for electronics, going from a few decades, 1970s onwards, you would see clear trends, which is that you've gone from bulky single function expensive systems to something which are lighter weight, thinner, maybe to some extent flexible, and also have much more flexibility in terms of functionality. So they have, like, if you look at your smartphone or your smart watches, these are your voice communication, these are your GPS, these are your music players. So a lot of functionality has been embedded in it. So the trends for electronics is pretty clear, right? So the electronics is becoming smaller in size. We like miniaturization. It's becoming lower in cost, and it is coming with enhanced functionality. So more and more features need to be added. That those are the trends, and these are kind of the motivation factors for us to explore the electronics of future in my lab. Now, some of the applications you probably know, because I'm believing that most of the people here in this audience, they are versed with the RF microwave kind of field. So RFID, which is the radio frequency identification devices, is a known and mature field, right? Where they are put on toll plazas to automatically collect the toll. They are being put on inventory, let's say in big superstores like Walmart's, to do automated inventory and stuff like that. And now for tracking objects, RFIDs are being used. Very mature, been out there for many years. The major issue with the RFID industry right now is to bring the cost of a single RFID tag down. Right now, a tag would cost around 25 cents, and the industry is looking at to bring it down to 1 cent or so. And the reason is because the volume is huge. For example, let's say Boeing last year only were using RFID tags in the range of 1 billion or so, right? So you could understand that the market of RFID is huge. So they really need to make it like a mass production, high volume, high throughput, lower cost RFID tags. And the other application, probably some of you are familiar, it's a buzzword now, IoT, Internet of Things. Briefly, I'll explain it the way we humans connect to each other through internet. So, for example, right now I'm talking to all of you through this voice over IP channel. There is machines gonna be talking to machines, or non-living things will be talking to non-living things through the internet. So devices or things would be talking, not like. And why do they do that? Because these guys, the machines will make smart decisions for humans to ease our day-to-day life, right? So typically give an example of, let's say you guys go to a busy shopping mall, and very often you would not find a parking spot. So here is the IoT example, where your car, while going close to the parking lot, would ask the parking lot, hey, do you have any parking spot available? And the parking lot will tell the car, yes, which store do you want to go to? And the car would say, okay, let's say I want to go to Gap Kids, right, store. And the park, oh yes, go to the third floor and parking number, let's say 294, and here are the directions, right? All of this happened between the car and the automated system in the parking lot. And they made a smart decision for the human who is sitting in the car and get you to your point. There are a number of examples. It is estimated that approximately in the next few years, let's say up to 2025, up to 50 billion devices will be connected to the net. Now, very important parameter for that is, if the non-living things or devices need to make decisions like humans. Of course, it's a big thing. There are so many fields involved in it. But for me, people like me, there are two important things. One is sensing, and is communication, right? So let's say a device forest fire, right, or there's a gas leak in the industry. They would need to sense the gas, or they would need to either see or feel the fire. That's one thing. So they need to inform others about this forest fire, industrial gas leak, or whatever, right? So that's how humans operate. So sensing and communication is very, very important for the future of Internet of Things. And because billions of devices need to be made and installed or dispersed in the environment, you really need, again, very low cost methods. You need roll to roll, reel to reel kind of fabrication methods. You need flexibility, because these objects, these sensing, wireless sensing or wireless communication modules need to be installed on non-conformal, maybe sometimes on humans, because machines also need to so flexibility, conformability, lower cost, reel to reel, roll to roll manufacturing, high throughput, all these are the factors which are required for the future generation of electronics, especially for these applications. Now, I'm just building momentum for additive manufacturing and printing, right? Manufacturing, as you guys could have guessed. Now, printing or additive manufacturing, I'm going to go into traditional applications like RFID and stuff like that. There are new applications being generated because of this technology, and industry is adapting it. And you would be sometimes people get surprised that they see that there are objects already in the market out there which are being used. So this is a wireless temperature sensor, a Bluetooth temperature sensor sticker, which is a company called Temtrack. I met them in San Francisco a couple of years ago. And these guys have a temperature sensor and a Bluetooth module all in this tag, which is on a baby's body. So the temperature is taken from the baby's body and sent to the parent's phone round the clock. So, if some of you are parents, you know that taking a temperature of a sick child through a traditional thermometer is a pain. So this is very useful, and this is a new application. And imagine if you have a rigid, hard PCB, can you put it on a child's body? No. This application is possible because of the flexibility, the ease of wearing, and stuff like that. This is the HVAC, the AC and the heat and temperature controls panel from a Mitsubishi wagon. And this is basically printed. This has been in use for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. It's already there in the cars. So industry is adapting to these low cost methods. This is another company, Bebop Sensors. They print sensors on the insoles of the shoes to monitor activities and stuff like that. Already in use. So this manufacturing technique is picking up, and it's not only for traditional applications but also for generating some new applications. But these are examples of 2D printing, right? 3D printing also is considered to be a big change. Actually, some of the experts call it the third industrial revolution, in terms of that they believe that in the future everything will be 3D printed, and the 3D printed objects will be like, for example, the Amazon right now works like you order something and you will get the item. It's believed that future. One of my student, Garrett, was company in US for internship, and they were printing different parts of the mobile phone, so that people can print like displays, covers, keyboard, stuff like that, with their own color choices and stuff like that at home. So that's kind of 3D printing is making a big change as well. This is an example, of course, model is wearing has been 3D printed. Shoes are being 3D printed. So electronics is not far behind, and 3D printing is taking its space in the electronics industry as well. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit detail about inkjet printing before going into the details. I keep on talking about additive manufacturing, additional manufacturing, whether you just take a simple printed circuit board, which is metallized on both sides. You guys have probably built, fabricated some of the antennas, some layouts on a PCB. So a typical board comes with metal cladding on both sides, right? So this metal, if you want to make your layout, you need to create either a mask or a screen of your design, and then you need to basically etch the metal away. The extra metal, you need to etch it away. What is that? That is, you're removing the material, you're subtracting the material, and this material is wasted. This is how the traditional manufacturing works right now. That's why we call it subtractive manufacturing. That you have a blanket layer of the material, and then you create your pattern by removing the material. Even if you go to the clean rooms like microfabrication or nanofabrication, you deposit material, you have to create expensive masks. You need to use vacuum based very expensive tools, material wastage, and a lot of money spent on the mask and etc. Inkjet printing or additive manufacturing in general is as simple as you print in your home and office environment. Of course, I'm making it a bit sound more simple than it is. There is a lot of science involved in preparing inks and making them jettable and printable. But yes, the process is the same. If you have the right ink, right printer, you have your digital layout in your computer. You have your design, let's say, of your antenna, and then you just press print, and then it would start depositing material according to your plan, according to your layout, according to your design, in a completely digital fashion, which means that you deposit material only where it is required. This is what is additive manufacturing. You do not need blanket layers. You do not need masks or screens or any other like photoresist and stuff like that. You just digitally create your pattern as if you would print in your home and office environment any graphic or pattern. By the way, we know printing from many years, right? We know printing from 100 years. Actually, newspapers and magazines have been printed from 100 years. And we have been printing on graphic, the t-shirts which you wear with all kind of pictures and your favorite quotes. They're all screen printed on the textile. So we know, but we've never been able to print electronics in a way we can do now, right? And the reason is that the advent of the new nanoparticle based inks, and you are able to create, especially the metallic inks. I'm talking about the metallic inks. Previously, you could never get the conductivities which you would like as of bulk metals. But with the advent of nanoparticle inks, because of the surface volume ratio, now you could actually make these inks at much lower temperatures, and you could get conductivities which are comparable to bulk metal. Now, printing, the other advantage of so it is lower cost because there is no material wastage, there is no masks, there is no screens. It's an additive process. It is compatible with flexible substrates, right? So your paper where you print is flexible. Your t-shirts where you print are flexible, right? So the traditional manufacturing techniques are not all of them are compatible with the flexible substrate. So you struggle. And of course, there are now some flexible PCBs industries are coming up as well, and I know the best of those best foundries. I deal with them, and even they cannot produce the kind of robustness and reliability which you need at present. Hopefully that will improve. Uh, People like me who are working in this field, our goal is to print electronics like newspapers and magazines, right? Roll to roll, reel to reel. Imagine you see a big roll. Have you ever seen a newspaper being printed? This big roll which is going at a fast speed, and the newspapers are printing like. So if we can print electronics like that, that is what you need for the applications of the future. Internet of Things, RFIDs, billions of devices. You need to print devices in milliseconds, microseconds, right? So imagine if you have a printer which can take a sheet of up to 1 meter by 1 meter, and it is printing with a speed of 40 meters per second. Imagine how many millimeter scale or micrometer scale devices and designs you will print in 1 second. That's the kind of throughput I'm talking about. This is a dream. We have done a lot of work, and the rest of the world, of course, there's other people who are doing a lot of work towards this dream. There are many people who share the same dream, and they are trying to do this to be able to print electronics like newspapers and magazines. We have made a lot of progress, but we are not there yet. There's a lot of work still left. But I'll share some of the work which we have done in the past few years. Okay, just before going into the details of the work, I just want to tell you about process of. I talked about the nanoparticle based inks, so just to make you familiar, because some of the terms I will be using in this presentation, so I want you guys to be a bit familiar with that. By the way, I'm not a material scientist. I'm a pure electrical engineer and RFIC designer by training. In Canada, I was designing ICs for biomedical applications, but when I came to KAUST, and I was very interested in this kind of low cost, flexible RF systems, antennas, and stuff like that. And I saw printer. That's how we started working with it. But last many years, I've learned a lot of things. And now, we started with commercial inks, but now we can make our own inks, and I think that's the way to go. So typically, let's say we're talking about an example of making a metallic ink. You would take typically a metal salt, right? And you will have some reducing agent. Reducing agent is basically metal salts are like to reduce the metal ions, and then you have capping agent. Right, the capping agent is basically keep in mind. I'm going to tell you later on why it is used. But for now, you need this. You make the solution of this. You put the right solvent, and you start heating it. When you start heating it, you will see small, like these nuclei kind of being formed, metal nuclei are formed, and then you kind of heat them again, keep on heating, and then you will have these right sizes being formed. Now you could see these are metallic kind of nanoparticles, right? And this is a bit more clear, and you see there's a red boundary around them. This red boundary is basically because of that capping agent. What is this capping agent? This is just a polymer. We also call it kind of a ligand. This polymer coat is there so that these nanoparticles don't mix with each other before printing. Of course, after printing, you want them to mix with each other because you want continuous traces. But before printing, you don't want them to form big lumps, right? Because then it will not be possible to print them through those fine nozzles of the printers. From the nozzle, you still want it in a very liquid form, so that you could pass through those nozzles. But after it is printed, then we basically get rid of these capping agents. I will tell you in the next slides how to get rid of them. And then these nanoparticles mix with each other to form continuous traces. Basically, you do a centrifuge step where you kind of mix these, and eventually you're heating and mixing it, and then you kind of get the right viscosities and the surface tensions which you want, and you can get your ink. In this particular case, this is like a silver nanoparticle basic. So you go from salt and grow the nanoparticles, mix with the solvent mixing, and you get your inks. Okay, there are a number of different kind of printers, but the ones which we are using are mostly piezo based printers. So I'm gonna just with this video, I'm just gonna show you briefly how the piezo works. You all know piezoelectric materials, right? So when you apply a voltage or electric field across them, they can deform, right? They can change their shape. These are the piezo materials. So if you can take one of these piezo element and put it on a vibration plate, and you apply a voltage or let's say electric field, this will basically create that pressure on a nozzle, right? Where it can eject the drops. And because of this fine control of the voltages waveform, you could eject the drops of your own sizes. Multiple of these nozzles can be used together, and then you could print those. So this is how typically a piezo printer works. So very fine control through the applied voltage waveforms. Now remember that we had these capping agents, right? So now we have printed. We have printed on the right substrate, but these capping agents are still there, and so that's why they do not allow you to form like continuous films or continuous. Let's say if you are making an antenna or transmission line. So what you need to do is that you need to get rid of this polymer as well as the solvent. So the ink is still very liquid, right? So you need to get rid of that solvent. So what you do is that there's a number of ways. You could simply heat them so that the solvent evaporates, and the ligands melt away. The polymer coatings melt away, and you're just left with these nanoparticles which can mix with each other or connect to each other. This process of getting rid of the solvents and getting rid of these polymers, this is all, traditionally it is called as sintering. Right, sintering. So sintering can be a number of ways. It could be simple in an oven, it could be, there could be many other methods which I'm going to show you in this presentation. Once these sintered nanoparticles start to mix with each other and they start to find patterns, and we'll talk about this metallic ink here. You could see that as the temperature of the sintering is higher, you get a better conductivity, which is better mixing of the nanoparticles. Eventually, you could engage this sintering mechanism onto your printing flow mechanism as well. so that once you are printing at the same time, another panel is getting centered for the roll to roll. Now, when you talk about printing, paper comes to your mind, right? Because we have been printing, as I said, on newspapers and magazines from 100 years. But paper is not typically used for electronics. However, this is also changing, right? You could see that people are making solar panels, RFID tags, even displays. So Arizona State University have a big flexible display center, where many of them are they're using paper. The idea for these displays is also to roll them like sheets, like your posters. So if you have a TV, which is like a poster, so you could fold it from one room, go and put it on the next wall. So that's the kind of idea of those flexible displays. Why paper for electronics? Because paper is the cheapest substrate material you will find, which naturally comes to us. It is 10 times cheaper than the cheapest plastic which we use right now. Like the plastic bottle which you drink water in and throw it, paper is 10 times cheaper than that. It can do roll to roll, wheel to wheel printing, as we know from newspapers and magazines. It is lightweight. It is biodegradable, by the way, because it comes from a natural, renewable source. It comes from trees, right? And so this is a very very good option. It's just it needs to be robust and reliable enough to contain the electronics. So many people who start printing this, they also like to do it on paper, and we also did that. So for me, starting the printing process is very interesting. As I told you that in Canada I was a pure CMOS IC design guy, so I was doing RFICs and a lot of function panels, a lot of circuits and sensors integration, stuff like that. When I came to Kaust, I was interested in doing these flexible kind of materials, and Kaust was very new, and a lot of equipment was bought left and right. And I was visiting one of the labs, core labs, and I saw a big printer there. And I asked the guy, what is this for? He says, oh, you could print a lot of stuff from this, function, functional materials. Can you guys still hear me? Is there a question, or I
Yes,
hear?
sir. Yes, yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. So very interestingly, I said, "Can we print electronics from this printer?" And the guy said, "Sure, maybe. Why not? You could print." And at that point, I was also new at Kaust, and I had a student from America, U.S. Chicago, actually. He was like adventurous enough to come from Chicago to my lab to do graduate studies. His name is Benjamin Cook. So Benjamin, very smart student. He came to me and I said, Benjamin, do you see this printer? He said, yes. It says, would you like to print electronics? And he's like, oh, that sounds very cool. And I was like, look, I don't know much about it. I'm as new as you are, so we're gonna learn together. And he said, fine. And we started working on it. I had no background, by the way, in printing, and we were just fiddling with that printer. uh, Many months passed, and we could not get that damn thing to work. And at some point, I think after 4 or 5 months, uh, Benjamin came to me. He was doing masters at that point of time, and he said, "Professor, I think I'm going to fail my thesis." And I said, "Why do you say that?" It says the damn thing doesn't work, and I've tried everything. And I said, "Look, in research we try new things, and we are bound to fail. We should not lose heart by failures. So let me get some advice from a bit more experienced people." So I called my friend in Georgia Tech, USA. He's a good friend, Manos, and I asked him because he's a bit more senior to me on these fabrication techniques. So I asked him, and he said probably you're using a wrong printer. He recommended me like a Dymatics, Fujifilm Dymatics printer. He said that's more suitable for electronics printer. The printer which you are using is more like a single nozzle kind of a bio related application printing. So I got the printer, the Fujifilm printer, and then start to roll. And Benjamin did finish his thesis and graduated. And by the way, the first he became the founding director of Printing Electronics Research Lab in Texas Instruments in Dallas, USA. So very prestigious lab. It is part of the Jack Kilby's lab. You guys know Jack Kilby. was the founder of the transistor, the famous Nobel laureate. So Texas Instruments has this lab after him, Jack Kilby. So Benjamin actually went and became the founding director. He founded the printed transistor lab. So a good motivation for students. Sometimes you are failing in your experiments and all that, but you never know what's in the future. You need persistence for your research experiments. Anyways, when we started, this is the work which I and Benjamin did together. We were very
तू वाली
new,
खा गया तू बिना नमक वाली
and we
सुबह
wanted
की
to
बनी
get
थी
prize. We want to
कहाँ है
know how
बाकी
this printing works and stuff like that. So
रुक
we
जा
did
तू
different
सबसे नीचे
experiments.
है ना उनमें
We saw that if you print multiple layers
मिक्स हो गई है
on
वैसे
a substrate, the conductivity starts
खाए
to
पापा
increase, and it makes sense because for every layer there's a limited number of nanoparticles. Particles are by percentage weight in that system. You print, you have some nanoparticles containing nanoparticles, but then you print another layer on top of it, more
अबे
nanoparticles stuffed in, and so on.
मुझे बार
and
बार
and
गुस्सा आ
then
रहा है मेरे कपड़े
basically nanoparticles, that you get the kind of conductivity. What was encouraging was, and this is, we just started with a commercial ink on a regular photo paper substrate, that you could get conductivities which are of the order of close to the bulk metals. Like for example, copper, silver, gold, they are like 5 into 10 per 7 Siemens per meter. We were getting around 2 or 1.2 or 2 into 10 per 7 Siemens. So this was very encouraging because you could get conductivities of the metal close to that. The minimum gaps or feature sizes which we could get from those printing was like 20 microns. That's still the kind of limit for the Dymatics, like desktop Fujifilm printer. And if you want, honest answer is that reliably, if you want to print the same structure reliably, I think for that printer it's 50 microns, right? Below 50 microns, you're lucky you can get 20 or 30 microns. Sometimes you may not get, because you're really pushing the limit there. For every layer, you will add a thickness of half a micron. And so this means that if you want, like, you're all RF guys, you know that due to skin depth, you need a certain thickness for conductors. Let's say if you need 3 microns, you can print
कैसे
6
बात
layers, and that will give you 3 microns. So you could print multiple layers. You could print even more, 20, 30 layers, whatever you want, and you could get the right thicknesses. Conductivity, you already talked about what kind of conductivity you could get from this. I recently bought, not recently, I would say 1.5 years ago, I bought a new printer from Japan. It's called a super inkjet printer. Now, this printer is not as easy to use as the Dymatics, but it can do wonders. Like, it can print up to 1 micron feature size, and it can work with a number of materials, like a lot of viscosity, because the Dymatics is kind of limited in what kind of viscosity. It is very particular with a certain 10 to 20 cps kind of viscosity. This new printer which I bought, that can go with a number of viscosity. You could print a variety of materials there. Anyways, this field is moving very fast. So every now and then we see new printers, new inks coming out. Now, one thing which I learned, sometimes when you're new in a field, you kind of question everything, which is good. I actually urge my students to ask questions to everything, right? So that opens. So when we started doing this, the advice which I got was that for sintering, right, getting rid of those polymer coatings and the solvents, what people do, they have these big ovens, and you would put this your design or substrate into that oven after printing for hours. And because I was working with paper substrates, sometimes plastic substrates, and the heating needed to be done to 150 degrees centigrade or more, sometimes I would see that either the plastic is melted, or if I have a paper substrate, it will turn brown or something like that. So I started questioning this. I said, I want to work with these flexible, thin substrates, and I have to do this oven sintering. And then I started questioning. I said, why do I need to heat the whole substrate? Right? Because I only need to remove the solvent, and I need to polymer coating on the trace, on the printed traces. Why I need to heat the whole substrate? So thinking about that, I thought about a laser, and we had a laser like a 10.6 micron. Okay, new things can be tried. We don't have to follow the same line which everybody is doing, right? So new things can be tried, and that just opened up many things in printing. Okay, guys. Now with this kind of small tutorial on printing and printing I'm going to show you some examples of the work done in my lab. And what you can do with this fractal is that we have done a lot of work on fractal antennas. What you could do with this fractal is that you could introduce introduce new resonances, and by placing these resonances, either you could do multi-band antennas or you could do wideband antennas, and we have done both. There's a number of works which we papers which we have done on multiband and wideband antennas. In this particular case, we were trying to do a wideband antenna because we are trying to cover this ultra wideband frequency of 3.1 to 10.6 gigahertz. So by introducing these multiple resonances and smartly placing these resonances close to each other, you could actually get that. But also there's an also advantage when you're doing printing, because the only expense in printing is the ink, right? And also that's not a big expense because you just use picoliter. You know, understand pico is very, very small. So some picoliter, some drops of inks which you use. But you can also save on that ink by this approach. So if this section, this triangular section was completely printed, right, we will have performance degradation as well. But by smartly doing a fractal approach, and we've not only enhanced the bandwidth, but we also saved almost 60% of the ink. So that was kind of purpose of design. We printed it on a normal photo paper, not optimized for RF microwave. You could see it is printed on the front, and the ground plane is printed on the back side. You're seeing both the views here. Just printing, we printed it in like maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so. Very fast, and the performance is as good as any PCB based antenna. You could see good impedance from 3 to almost 10 gigahertz, like very wide bandwidth, and we had a decent radiation performance from this, as you would expect from a PCB antenna. The advantage is this guy, you could print it very fast, very low cost, and you could flex it, you could crumble it and throw it in the dustbin and print 10 new more, right? So that's the really advantage. As I said, we would like to do a lot of multi-band antennas. One of my students, Hassan, love to do multi-band antennas. So there's an example where you again start basic antenna. You start with the monopole. This is the design strategy shown here. Basically, other kind of papers, like this is a paper called Teslin. Other papers which do not have polymer coatings, and they can retain their flexibility. So whatever way you want to flex the antenna, you can do that, and then you not have if you've done it smartly, you will not have a lot of issues. We also printed on leather. One of my student. Okay, I give you another interesting example. How are we doing with time? We still have time, right? And so this is a tracking system. So this project started in an interesting fashion. So one of my friend over dinner told me that his 2-year son, a toddler, went missing while they were in a shopping mall, right? And he was telling me this story on a dinner, and says, "Oh, we panicked, and we called the mall police, and they found their son after 20 minutes or so, like in another shop under the table playing with something." And but those 20 minutes were really hard for the parents, right? So he was telling me this story, and I was like, and this was, by the way, 4, 5, 6 years ago, and I was like, with all this technology, you should be able to find your son, right? And he said, how? And I said, oh, I put a graduate student. So that's how we started working on this project. It just started as a kind of a fun project, but then you have a GPS module. The GPS will give you the coordinates. You could send these coordinates like you send your messages, SMS, and then you could, or through GPS, like your 3G data or 4G data, and then you could send it to our server, and this will demonstrate them on any internet-enabled devices on, let's say, through Google Maps and stuff like that. So you are real-time looking at the like the object who's wearing that tracking device. Indoors was a bigger problem because GPS does not work indoors. So we then opted for Wi-Fi. So we added Wi-Fi because most of the indoor, like the buildings and shopping malls, most of the buildings, and even the concept of smart cities, now Wi-Fi will be it connects to the Wi-Fi and it sends the coordinates to the Wi-Fi. So, and again, to make it lightweight and variable, layer of printing, and then we have a very thin lithium polymer battery. We have 3 antennas: GPS, GSM, and Wi-Fi, all designed together, multiple layer, and stacked into a variable pack. And you could see this is we made a complete system. We made a complete system with the front end server where you could just go put your username and you could start seeing the tags. And this is my 2 students which I'm tracking. We are at the different locations. Present this. When we were doing this project, the students, they put a tracker in my car, They would know when the professor is coming, where he's going. And one day, mistakenly, after many months, one of the students said, "Oh, you were last night. You late night. You were driving very fast." I was like, "What? How do you know that?" And then it was revealed. So I told them to take the tracker out and stop tracking me. Anyways, this worked well. You could see that we could accurately, on average, find out the location within the 4 to 5 meters of accuracy, which is typical of the GPS accuracy at that point of time. I said it became big. Why? Because the student who was working on this, he then so we've changed it from a variable patch to bracelets, and it has multiple technologies like GPS, GSM, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, RFID, and a special beacon mode. So we have like six tracking technologies integrated, and this is now being commercialized for use in crowded places for, let's say, pilgrims or shopping. Clothing, why cannot we print it directly on the child clothing, like on the t-shirt? That's how we started printing on the textile, right? So this is the SEM image, microscopic image of a normal t-shirt. Your t-shirts are basically cotton or a mix of a cotton or polyester. So when you look at into a microscope, you see a lot of holes. And when we started trying to print on it, the print was not sticking; it was going through the holes. So then what we did, we said that let's print our dielectric layer. So that's where we created a dielectric ink, and we printed, which was a bit more thicker than the metallic ink, and then layer on the textile. And by the way, the greenish yellow color which you see is basically the t-shirt material. Please don't judge me on the color. This was bought by my student, and he chose that color. I don't know for what reason. But we had others as well, and you could see that we printed on different t-shirts with this dielectric layer on different t-shirts, and we were able to flex them and work through them. We realized that we can print on them. Skipping you details of the printing process, this is available in this paper if you want, if you're interested. We printed again a tracking system, complete tracking system, which is Wi-Fi based only, right? Because I didn't want to make it very complicated, and I realized that Wi-Fi can do it. Wi-Fi tracking can do a decent job outdoors and indoors. Let's say we are moving towards smart city kind of applications, smart campuses where Wi-Fi will be everywhere. So why not just work with Wi-Fi and get rid of GPS and GSM and all those bulky chips and expensive chips? So we just work with Wi-Fi. You could see this kind of inverted F-type of antenna and the circuit board, and this was designed. And this is where we put it on a T-shirt. And this is my student Bauer, who's walking around the campus, and we are touching it. The accuracy is not as great as the GPS-based system, because GPS, of course, doing this kind of triangulation and trilateration with multiple satellites. We were still around 15 meters of average. We tested in air and on body around 15 to 20 meters of accuracy, which is, I think, is good enough. If somebody has lost his child, and they get in the vicinity of 10 to 15 meters of their child, most likely they'll find the child, right? So this was just a Wi-Fi based system. And many people ask me this question: oh, how do you find location through Wi-Fi? We actually look at the MAC, like the address of that router. So there are different Wi-Fi routers, so we connect to every router. This is how your mobile phones hook up to different towers. So when you move from one place to the other, you're connected to one tower, and then you're connected to the other tower. That's how the cell phone companies know your location, because your phone is always connected to one of the towers, and they know the location of the tower. That's how they know your location, right? So the same principle. We know the location of the Wi-Fi routers, and when you're connected to each one of those routers, we can basically find out where you are. There's just nothing, again, the details are in the paper. And the question which I always get is, no, we don't need to know the passwords of those Wi-Fi routers. We don't need the password. We don't really need to get into them. We just read their address. Okay. Again, when I was presenting this work in one of the conferences, the previous work, when we printed on textile, so the audience was like, great, you could print on textile and t-shirts, that's awesome, but can you wash that t-shirt? And I was very good question. Let me try and find out. And then we started working. And then I also problem we realized, this is a major question, is that when you print and when you make those strips or the connections hardened after sintering, if there is no flexibility in the printed traces, sometimes with excessive flexing, they get cracks, right? So that was also a problem we were experiencing with flexing, especially when you put ICs and you make connections to the traces, those connections would break because of flexing. So that was also a problem. So we started thinking about that together. So we started working with the inks which have some more a bit more flexibility. So what we did, we add a little bit of polymer in the conductor ink. So with the metallic nanoparticles, we add a little bit polymer. So polymer has this stretching. So we still have conductivity. We get a little bit of trade-off on the conductivity, but it would have a bit more stretchability. So we started working with stretchable conductive ink, stretchable metals. And we also started working with having like a dielectric layer printed on top of it, so to protect it from washing. So in this process, we just for a proof of concept, we designed a very simple filter with two shorted stubs to have show a better design. We printed it, and we printed it on two textiles. Now, see, this textile is basically stretchable. This is like more like your athletic, like exercise T-shirts or something like that, which is a bit stretchable because we want to show stretchability as well, and flexibility and stretchability. Remember, these are two different things. Stretchability is when you can, right? That's different from flexing. So we did printing on this material through non-stretchable ink as well as stretchable ink, just to compare, right? Just to compare. And we saw that we could stretch the ink up to almost 30%, which is the typical stretching limit of a wearable T-shirt and all that. And you could see that the non-stretchable ink develops permanent cracks, whereas the stretchable inks does develop some cracks, but as soon as you release it, the cracks are again filled up. So it could work. You could see that the stretchable ink could, though the performance is deteriorated a little bit, but it could still work up to 25 to 30% of stretching, which is the limit of that. The non-stretchable, as soon as you stretch it one time, that's it. It's gone. It doesn't work again. You have permanent cracks there. So this was good stuff which we did in terms of variable stuff, variable antennas and all that. Then we also did a washing experiment. This is not a washing mean spin coater in my lab, but we just use this. We put water and some surf and everything in this, and then we started spinning it. And we did many washes, I think 2 or 3 washes, and then we every time we take it out and we measure it, we got the similar performance because we had a polymer coating, like we had a layer, dielectric layer printing on top of it, so it was protected. So this means that way we can print. Actually, researchers have reported up to 100 washes you can do, and this will still work. So that was pretty good, good news for people who like to print on textiles. Now, sometimes you need to create multiple layers, and in those multiple layers, you need to connect from one end to the other. And typically, you guys, we use vias, right? Like these are conductive holes, so holes which have metal in it, so that can connect one layer to the other. Because we want to do everything through printing, so I also wanted to create vias through printing. So what we did first, we took a thick substrate because like a 1 mmp MMA, and in order to create a hole so that we can connect the top and the bottom, we created a hole. First we created a straight hole through laser and then tried to print it. This was 1 millimeter, and remember, one printed layer actually gives you half a micron kind of thickness. So if we tried to print it, but the ink was not sticking to the vertical walls. And then we need a lot of layers, like hundreds and hundreds of layers to print it. So it was very troublesome. So what we thought a solution was that we did a staircase on either side, staircase on the top and then staircase on the bottom. Eventually we made them meet. And then we started printing. Now, because you have these horizontal surfaces where the ink can stick and very small vertical surfaces, we were able to print with a fewer number of layers, and the ink, there was no problem sticking to the wall. So that's how we connected. We created vias. You could see these SEM pictures of these vias created. very nice. And we did complete arrays of these vias, printed vias, and then we characterized them. We saw that overall the resistance created by each via was very small. So they were very, very much usable as you would do vias in the printed circuit board. Once we did that, then we did a lot of work on SIW kind of designs. This is one paper which is design showing um, transition from microstrip line to SIW. You guys familiar with SIW, right? This is a substrate integrated waveguide. So if you want to create a waveguide on a substrate, you cannot create vertical walls, but you create these holes on the edges to create those vertical walls. So this is all printed on the top, this is all printed on the bottom, and then in order to create a waveguide, you will just create holes and then metallic vias. So this will make the wave go through like you have a waveguide on a substrate. So this is called SIW technology. And then transition, so it worked very well. And then we did a bunch of filters, antennas on that technology. But you could do those vias on that. Now I have shown you so far only printing of metal, right? But in order for us to be fulfilling that dream of having those fully printed systems, we also need to print the dielectric or the substrates themselves, right? So we did a process without going into much details. You could have, we made an organic ink dielectric PVP, so you could print one layer, then you could print metal on top of it, then you can print another layer or multiple layers if you want. You could print vias, you could go another metal, so you could print multiple layers. What we are doing is that we are printing now the dielectric as well. The typical substrate which you buy from the market, you can also print it. So this is now becomes a fully printed system. These vias were interesting. We called them dissolving type vias because here we did not use lasers or anything because these were thin layers. So what we did was when we printed the dielectric layer, we did not heat them or sinter them, and they were still wet, and we printed the metal where the via was supposed to happen. So this right here, the metal connection was made, and then basically we would heat it, and no more metal can penetrate through. So these we call a very interesting dissolving kind of vias. And then talking about when I and Benjamin started back in 2011 or 12, we've come a long way. We now have fully printed processes, multiple layer processes. We started with oven sintering, but now we know we use a lot of different kind of sintering mechanisms, whether UV or flash or infrared, and we can now hack. We actually hacked ink. This is one of my Canadian students, Garrett's work. We could hack ink from 3D printers into 2D printers, and the 2D printed ink into the 3D printers. And sometimes we need to make thicker layers, sometimes thinner layers. We can do crossovers, we can do vias. The whole multi-layer processes we've arranged. And back those 3-4 years ago, we showed this paper came in Nature. We showed the first fully printed 3D, combining the 3D printing and the inkjet printing. The first filter, it worked very well. I was surprised actually to see the performance, especially keeping in mind that this was a completely fully printed, like the substrates, everything was printed on that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the 3D printed antennas. We did a lot of work on 3D printed antennas as well. I don't have time for that. There's some other parts I need to show. But this is one example. We did a honeycomb kind of substrate. This honeycomb substrate, you see these are concentric rings. This is not a normal substrate. If you want to make this substrate through a normal manufacturing method, this can take you at least a day, even more, because very complicated structures. We created this substrate in maybe a couple of hours. We created this whole prototype in a couple of hours. So very complicated substrate. Why we are doing this? Because we wanted, in this particular application, we wanted to reduce the weight, and we wanted to improve the efficiency of the antenna. So we by creating these air pockets, we actually created, we reduced the weight of the antenna. You said we reduced by 7 times. We almost 5 grams of the antenna, and then also we improved the efficiency by I think 20 or 30%. We did like waveguides, 3D printed waveguides. We did slot array antennas. We did helical antennas. We printed complete lenses. There's a lot of work we done. Again, there are papers which you can read. This is also a big emerging technology. All of our major conferences have now these 3D printed antenna sections. One concept which is emerging now, it is becoming big, and why I'm saying big is because I interact with with companies. I work with a lot of companies. Right now, I'm doing some 5G designs with IBM, TJ Watson Center America, and Sony Ericsson, who have just launched their 5G chipsets through Verizon in US. Also have some interactions with the other companies. So I know many companies, especially the mobile companies or the wireless devices companies, are now looking at this center on package concept. And I've actually seen some examples from Sony Ericsson doing antenna package designs. But many companies are now trying to do this. I actually just wrote a book chapter with IBM collaborators on this, which came out. You guys can read that on antenna package. What's the concept? The concept here is that typically ICs or circuits actually have this black thing is a cover, right? It's a cover or a package which is just there to protect the ICs or the circuits, right? And this basically, the whole thing goes onto a system board. But this package does not do anything other than protecting. It takes a lot of space. There's a whole packaging industry. It costs money. It does not take any functionality. So the idea of system on package or end on package is that can we realize some components on the package because there is space, and that becomes part of the system, and that's how you would make them space efficient, cost efficient. So the antenna on package. So this is the concept, like a cartoon explaining the concept. This is actually from my book chapter, which shows that there's a package. Bottom part has like cavities where the ICs can go in, and you have interconnects going in. You can have inductors, filters, and then you can have antennas all connected through these interconnects through the package. So all of this is done in the package. So it's providing the protection, and it is also, so it becomes functional. So antenna in package or antenna in package, some people call it, is becoming very popular. And we have done a lot of work on this for other manufacturing technologies like low temperature cold ceramics, LTCC. But now we've started to do packaging through printing. So this is a work, I think, of my PhD student. By the way, Sue Zhen's PhD defense is in couple of hours. I have to go to her PhD thesis defense. She's defending today in couple of hours. She did good work. She did all theoretical calculations of this is a package where you see the circuits and the battery inside, and we design an antenna, which is a 3D antenna on the package. And you know, this paper, if you read, it's a very nice paper. It gives you all the theoretical, so we do theoretical analysis, gives you all the conditions to do what we are trying to do for IoT kind of applications. We want a pattern which is near isotropic, so as isotropic as possible, so that whatever is the orientation, we would still have communication, right? And we are doing it for multi-band, and you know, getting the right bandwidth was a challenging design with the electronics and everything. So you could see that the original design for which was narrow band, then we optimized it all around the package when the electronics is inside, and we design it on the package. And this is the printed version. So the package is 3D printed, and the antenna is again printed through screen and inkjet printed techniques. And see, very nice for both GSM bands. It is working a very wide bandwidth. For this wide bandwidth, we struggled a lot because we also need to maintain this kind of near isotropic radiation pattern. Right. So an example of antenna on package. This one, there's other work Sue has also done in this. This is our work. So how are we doing with time? Balwinder, I think I would like to skip some stuff because I also want to show you some sensor stuff. So I think we are only left with 10, 12 minutes, right?
Yes, as you speak, sir, we can skip. So, but if you want to have more time, then also we don't have any issue. So we can 10 to 15 more also. As you wish.
Okay.
I think you are busy, so you give the effort.
Maybe I can skip. This is very interesting project as well, but you know, I would like to skip it because it requires some time for me to. There are like 3 slides. Some people interested in this, please note down this title. This paper just came out. A very nice paper. We combine on chip and on package, enter on package, where we created 3D printed lenses. But I would like, in view of time, I would like to skip because there's a lot of stuff still remaining. We now started doing specialized inks, right? So we can do reconfigurability through specialized inks. So for example, we made a magnetic ink. magnetic ink, and then we can create completely magnetic substrates. Some people who work with magnetic materials, magnetic substrates, they would know that good magnetic materials are very expensive. If you want to have a good microwave magnetic substrate, first of all, they're not easily available, and then they are expensive as well. We were able to print. We can now 3D print or print our own substrates. So we did a magnetic substrate, and then we metallization on it on top of it. Now, what's the advantage of this magnetic substrate? The advantage is that this magnetic substrate, you when you apply a magnetic field, you could change its properties. You could change its material properties, which means that if you have an antenna on this magnetic substrate and you apply a field or pass current, DC current to it, or create a DC magnetic field, you could change the properties of a substrate, and you could actually tune or control the properties of the antenna which is realized on. So this is just a simple, the black or brown one, dark. It's actually dark brown. Is the printed magnetic substrate, and then we have this light color is the printed circular patch antenna. We designed it for around 6 gigahertz operation. Very interesting that it had almost like a linear polarization, and then we started applying bias. We started applying like DC magnetic field to it, and we saw that started seeing two resonant frequencies. So the one resonant frequency is moving downwards, and the other resonant frequency moving upwards, and these are giving two different sense of polarization. So one is giving us left-hand circular polarization, and the other is giving us right-hand circular polarization. So you could actually have two resonant frequencies with different sense of polarization on the frequencies you want from the same antenna just by applying bias and decent properties. So we did a lot of work again on these magnetic materials and magnetically controlled antennas. Another work which we've done, like ink recently we've done, is vanadium dioxide ink. Vanadium dioxide is a phase change material, which means that it's like an insulator at room temperature, and it becomes a conductor when you provide certain temperature to it or pass a certain amount of current through it. So it becomes a conductor. This means this can be used as a switch. So again, the motivation for this work was we needed some switches for millimeter wave, and one switch from analog devices, you could check it, this is online. One switch from analog devices for which can work up to 40 gigahertz would cost $30. One switch, and in a particular design of arrays you would need multiple switches, and these are very tiny switches, especially at millimeter, very tiny switches. To attach them to your designs, to your antennas, is very difficult. Like very fine soldering or mechanisms are required for attachment. So I thought, if we can make an ink which can act as a switch, we can solve both problems. This will be lower cost, and no need for attachment mechanism, because you could just print that ink wherever you want, and it will act as a switch. So with that, we started working with this vanadium dioxide. It took us 1 year. It was very difficult. A lot of material science. It took us 1 year to make this ink. But once we made that ink, it was very nice. I was very excited about this. This is the silvers are like just a CPW line, and the black ones are the printed VO2 switch. It's just a printed thin film. You put some printed drops there, and then it can cause on and off. So you could have a series switch, shunt switch. You could see that the resistance going from thousands of ohms to tens of ohms. So you go for off condition to on condition. Was working very well. And then we characterized it for RF performance. S parameters was working decent enough to be able to put it into antenna. One example for this antenna, which with the switch, so you see the yellow one is the antenna which acts like a T-type antenna. This is the switch. The black one is the switch here. So it is like can be a F-type antenna when this switch is on condition. So this is shorted to the ground, and when this switch is in the open position, this becomes like a T-type antenna. So you can have two different modes, and you could have two different frequencies. You see, this is again printed antenna. The black one is the switch here, right here, and you could see the two different modes very well matched and decent performance from this antenna. So this again, there's some work has been done. Actually, Shuai, my student, has done he graduated recently. He did a full PhD thesis on fully printed VO2 based RF reconfigured components. We've made a transparent ink as well with silver nanowires. There's a lot of applications where we're doing using transparency, which means that for example, very good application is that where you would have absorbers, microwave absorbers for stealth operation. For example, how the radars work, right? So they send a wave, and the reflected wave comes back, and that's how you find out the distance. What if the reflected wave does not come back, right? So if you have microwave absorbers, like thin absorbers, they can absorb all the waves. But if you want to put it on the complete body of, let's say, planes and all that, they need, and there are many other applications where optically transparent. So we made this optically transparent conducting material. There's actually a transaction paper which is not mentioned here, which just came out last month, September, which basically shows a complete like absorber FSS performance rod, which is transparent. So skipping the details of this periodic structure design of the absorbers, because I'm running out of time. This is a complete absorber, which is, you could see kind of optically transparent, like 80%, 85%, and which is still very conductive, and it is blocking the waves, certain waves. It is absorbing almost 80 to 90% of the waves. So you could print these on glass. You could print this on the glass of the windows, and then you could block waves. You could have frequency selective substances. There's again, very interesting work which we are doing with transparent. We are actually working with now a Canadian company on both these things, vanadium dioxide and transparent, because they want to do some reconfigurable antennas on the automotive windows, like the screens, windscreens, and the glasses. So this Canadian company, we've just started to do some work. Again, I'm going to skip details. This is again very flexible. It's not only transparent, flexible, conductive, and stretchable. All these designs. 10 minutes. Energy harvesting. Lot of work done on energy harvesting as well. I'm going to show you one example where we've done antenna in package again. So this is a fractal antenna. We want 3 bands. So we are basically harvesting from ambient. So you have wireless signals all around you. 900 megahertz, 1800 megahertz, 2.1 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz. There's a lot of wireless energy around you. So we said, okay, can we harvest energy from them, these RF signals? So we designed a rectantenna, which means basically a receive antenna and a rectifier. So in this particular approach, we have this kind of a cube package, and the rectifier circuit is inside, and we are designing this antenna. I'm just showing you steps for designing this antenna. That fractal approach, you could have multiple resonances, because we want 3 bands, 900, 1800, and 2100. So we add sections designed carefully based on the current distributions of different frequencies, and we get the right matches: 900 megahertz, 1800 megahertz, and 2.1 gigahertz. So we designed this antenna, we print it, 3D combination of 3D printed screen printing. This is the module, works well, and this is the rectifier. The circuit is also printed. This is something interesting. The circuit board is 3D printed. So we are doing the PCB printed circuit boards also through printing, and this is the 3-band matching network, which is also printed. So very nice. We match on all the 3 bands, and you see we saw that we can collect up to 250 or 300 millivolts from these bands, just putting it outside in the atmosphere, right? So, and surprisingly, we saw that when we are close to a phone, we can collect more energy, like 550 millivolts in terms of voltages, but microwatts in terms of power, right? So this is for IoT sensors. Very important, because right now we are using batteries, but the idea is if you put hundreds and thousands of those in that environment for sensing, and I will show you one example of that environmental sensor node, they need to power up. So this energy is enough to power this up, and this was published in Nano Energy a couple of years ago, but we have a new paper which got accepted a few months ago, where we show this temperature sensor in the environment being completely powered by ambient energy. So it does not use any battery, it just harvests energy. As soon as it harvests energy, it sends the temperature reading. So this is a paper, again, I can give you reference. I think it's in, I can't remember the journal, Applied Energy or something. Okay, I'm going to skip this. This was a work done for a Canadian company for blood radiation. It's a very interesting project. We did some interesting printed flexible antenna designs for their system of blood radiation system, which they are now using. I'm going to skip details for these blood bags and all. Just want to show you some. I'm still advocating printing, right? So these are the last few examples which I want to show you of sensors. So this is, I'm stationed in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is rich in oil. The biggest industry here is Aramco, which is the biggest oil company of the world. They came to me at certain point of time few years ago, and they said they had a big problem of when they get oil from the wells, they have water mixed in it because of many processes, right? Without getting into details, they have water mixed in it. As they get more oil from the wells, they extract more oils. This percentage of water keeps on increasing. They need to know which wells have how much water, and this is well mixed with oil, right? So for them, there was no real time mechanism to find, and this keeps on changing. And they spent millions of dollars going into a well, and then they found that there's a lot of water coming in. So they actually want to monitor real time. This is the equipment shown. This is the equipment which is like probably around $80,000, which they use. Not real time. They take a sample from the oil well and they would take it upstairs and then they would measure it. Right. So they came to me and I had a simple idea in my head, which can probably do this real-time monitoring. So I said, I think we can do it. And they said, give us a proof of concept. So the idea is very simple, and we realized it on a pipe surface. Our resonator, and we, of course, there's some design changes which we did with this new ground plane, but a simple lambda by 4 resonator, which is a signal conductor on the pipe surface, and then this has a ground plane on the other side. When you excite an RF signal, the electric fields will go from the top resonator to the ground plane, right? When these electric fields will go from the top to the bottom, they will go through the liquid, which is a mix of oil and water. Because that is now acting as a dielectric of this resonator, the resonant frequency should shift because the permittivities of the oil and water are different. So this was an idea in my head, and we tried some simulations. It worked, and you could see that we can actually detect even 1% of water in the oil. The target they given us was like 5%, 3 to 5%. If we can detect 1% as well. Whether it is separated, whether it is well mixed, we could detect well. So we designed these and we fabricated them, and Aramco was very happy, and they took it for testing. They have a flow loop in Houston, Texas, Aramco USA, and they tested it there. And they came back and they said, oh, great design, great concept, it works well sometimes, but it doesn't work the other times. And I was very disappointed because in the lab we have tested it very well, and in all conditions it worked very well. So I said, look, it worked very well in the lab. Well, how can you say that it doesn't work? And they said because, and then they told me that when they change the orientation of the pipe, like for example, this resonator is on the top. So when they move the pipe, so they were not careful, right? So they can attach the pipe in whatever direction. And what we would design was that the resonator has to be on the top always, because the electric fields need to go from the top to the bottom so that they can see the complete liquid. When they move it, let's say that if the resonator is moved 90 degrees, the electric fields will go horizontal, then they will not see the whole liquid. So that will not work. So they said, oh, whenever we put it in this orientation, it doesn't work. And I started laughing. I said, oh, look, it's not supposed to work that way, because you have to put it in this fashion and then it will work. And it says, are you crazy? We have hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of pipeline. And do you want us, for your sensor, to put these pipelines in one orientation? This will be a big headache. So you need to change the design. And because I've taken money from them, so I had to work and change the design. We came up with an alternate idea, which was a helical kind of design. So the sensor resonator would be rotating around the pipe. And that's how you would actually rotate the field as the pipe moves. So if whatever orientation they make the pipe, the electric field is moving inside as well because of that helical design. And that worked like a charm. Again, this is printed on the pipe surface, and this is now being tested in Houston. Worked very well. Again, we can detect 1% of oil. And more importantly, even for the whatever orientation, we have get the same result. So this passed. They're testing in Houston, then they tested it in Norway. There is a second startup company now from my lab, which is called Sensotech. My student, again, this student has started his company, and he's now doing business with Aramco. This has been installed in the fields now. This design has been installed in the fields now, and this is the first real-time water sensor which is being used now on the top surface, and we're also doing on the ground surface. So that's the kind of beauty of some of the applied research which you do. This is the IoT sensor I was talking about. This is again the same cube, but this time we had added sensors. So we've, just for proof of concept, we'd added temperature sensors, we've added humidity sensor, and we've added gas sensor. In this particular case, H2S gas. All of these sensors have been created through printing. Very low cost. We created the specific inks. For example, the gas sensor is made of carbon nanotube based ink. and the temperature sensor is basically a P dot PSS ink, and this is a air capacitor, like a humidity sensor. So all of these sense, and then we have a very nice 3D kind of antenna design, again a near isotropic kind of a 3D antenna design, special design on the package. The sensors on the package, all we have done the PCB again printing. You could see everything is 3D in inkjet printed here, and we did the full system. This is the sensors work well in the environment. We can detect gas levels, very small levels, and we can distinguish them. We can measure the humidity, temperature, and whatever is the orientation of these sensors. So the idea is to just throw them. They're so low cost, you can take hundreds of them through a drone, throw them in the environment, and they will be measuring the things which you want. We can do a number of sensors. The last example, I know, sorry, I'm out of time, but this is the last example I promise you, is the same IoT application but for variable applications. Again, we have done a lot of variable application. I'm showing you one example. This is for chronic wound patients. So people who have wounds, people who have diabetes, people who are obese, people who have like chronic patients, overweight, and they have like maybe have operations. They're lying on one side. Their wounds become bad. Their wounds don't stop bleeding. Their wounds, of course, bleed frequently. They develop infections. So for such patients, they need to be admitted to hospital because the doctors need to monitor their wounds. Sometimes they develop ulcers because of these. So what we wanted was a variable system which would allow these patients' wounds to be monitored remotely, the condition of the wound to be monitored remotely and sent to the doctor, whatever they needed, without these patients need to be moved to the hospital, so they can stay in their home and office environment. So we thought of a smart bandage concept. This would save a lot of money, Just in US, this approximately $39 billion are spent annually on this problem, right? So again, I wanted the bandage to be disposable, right? So that because the bandages are disposable, you put them on your wounds, and when you want to get rid of them, you throw them. So I wanted the bandage to be disposable. So we had two parts here. So there's a bandage which has the printed sensors, and then we have a Bluetooth sticker which is reusable. So the bandage sensors take the readings and they give it to the Bluetooth sticker. Bluetooth sends it to your mobile phone, and mobile phone to the medical authorities. What are we sensing? The doctors needed to see the bleeding pattern. So how much it bleeds, when it bleeds, we can detect bleeding. We can detect instances of bleeding. We can even detect even the volumes of the bleeding. The doctors. This is just showing you the bandage which is reusable. Sorry, bandage which is disposable, and this is a reusable Bluetooth sticker part which is goes on top of the bandage, and you could then package the way you want. So blood sensing, pressure sensing, and the most difficult for us was infection. When we went to the doctors, I was talking to two medical doctors. I was consulting with them on this project, and I would ask them, how would you detect infection in a wound? And they keep on telling me we do culture test. And I said, what is culture test? They said, we take the sample of the wound, we put it under a very powerful microscope, and then we match it with the database, and this is called like a kind of culture test. I said, look, I want to put it on the human body. I cannot put a microscope there. So tell me something else. And 2 or 3 hours I was trying to get any information from them, and nothing came out. When I was almost disappointed, I said something would change. Something would change in the wound or in the blood that would be indicative of the infection being developed in the wound. And they said, yes, oh yeah, the pH level changed. And here I go, pH, we can make a pH sensor. So then we made a pH sensor made of a special carbon. So pH, the wound surface changes its pH level, and the blood changes pH level from standard. So that's how you can tell the wound is getting bad and the infection is developing. So we made these sensors, special inks were made. We can distinguish between blood and sweat, and pressure sensing, pH sensing, all of that. And we tested it on human body, on air, on body, and it can communicate up to 60 to 70 meters, which is a good distance for like a variable application, a room, or office, or like home environment. Okay, with this, I'm gonna conclude the technical part of the presentation. I've just put this slide because very good researchers. Just to thank my Indian students and postdocs, very good researchers from India have been part of my group. Srujana, Wasim, Zubair are still in my group. They're working. Gaurav just left my group, some month, I think almost a year ago. He's now working in ISRO. Other students as well. Patel finished his PhD working for a printing company. Nidhi is in time. So I'm just trying to motivate more good students to apply, come to my lab for internships, for graduate studies. Overall, I'm thankful to my group who does this work. They basically fulfill my ideas and the vision. And I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I'm open for questions. Thank you so much for your patience. Sorry, I went 4 minutes over time. Apologize for that.
Thank you very much, sir, for your very interesting and highly informative talk. So you have shown very interesting designs and very useful designs, very innovative, different components and products which you have created in your lab. So I'm very thankful to you. So we are enjoying your session. So it's not about any 4 minutes. Even if you continue to till 10 minutes, 15 minutes more, then also it was very enjoyable. So thank you very much.
I think I can spend another 10 minutes or so for answering the questions.
Yeah,
But as
questions,
I
yes,
said,
sir.
I have to go. My student is having a PhD thesis defense in
Yeah, sir.
his.
Yeah, sir. I know. So you are having very busy schedule. So, dear participants, so if you have any quick questions, so you can write in the chat box, and we can keep busy, sir, for at least 5 to 10 minutes
Yeah,
more. So,
I can be with you with 10-15 minutes because I like to interact with students and I like to answer questions if you have any. Uh, uh, I want you to write so much, but thank you so much for you guys for your attention and for your compliments. Okay, any questions? Feel free. No question is a stupid question. I urge my students as well to ask whatever question comes to your mind. So feel free to ask. You can write on the chat window. I'm watching the chat window, or you could, if Balvinder allows you, you could open up your mics and ask through audio as well.
yeah, sir, it's not a problem. So, wants to get his or her mic unmuted, please write in the chat box. We'll unmute you. So we can easily unmute you. So kindly, who want to get his or mic unmuted, please write in the chat box. So I'm seeing some hands raising. So I think better if you write in the chat box. So it will be easy to identify.
So there's a question which says, does the decay detection decide the efficiency of antenna 3D printing? The permit decay or the permittivity of the substrates of the 3D printing method. That's kind of an interesting question. The efficiency of the antennas depend on many factors. One is the substrate loss. The substrate loss is basically detected by the DF, not the decay. That's a dissipation factor, right? Or commonly also known as loss tangent. But decay becomes important, interestingly important, or the permittivity becomes interestingly important for millimeter wave frequencies, right? Because there are extra substrate modes which result into surface waves, which come in, which kill the efficiency of the system. So accurate estimation, accurate measurement of the permittivity and trying to keep a low permittivity for the 3D printed substrates is important for millimeter wave antennas. Yes. I hope I answered your question. If not, please feel free to write in the chat box. Can you throw some light on the place sensor on the bandage? So we did not place the pH sensor. We just printed. We made a carbon ink because pH is sensitive to carbon material, so the resistance changes. So it's a resistance change sensor. So we made an ink and we printed our resistor on the bandage, directly on the bandage. We printed the resistor directly on the bandage, and when the sensor is exposed to the mixture of blood and wound surface, the resistance of the carbon material changes. So change in resistance we have tabulated to amount for the change in pH. So we can tell how much change in resistance corresponds to, because of our experiments, how much it corresponds to the change in pH level, and that's how we can accurately tell you what the pH level is. So we actually printed sensors directly on the bandage. Okay, I hope I answered your question. Could you please which substrate holds good for variable antennas in terms of avoid back radiation? Look, the substrate would not avoid back radiation. Okay, this is a big problem for variable antennas. You need to have a ground plane. You need to have a metallic structure or artificial surface. There is some work which we have done, and there's a lot of work we are doing now, because the work which I have not shown you here, now we are printing directly on human body. We're not using any substrate. So we are now printing, we have inks, we are now printing like tattoos. We are printing tattoos directly on human body for sensing and wireless communication, all that. Big problem, because we really need to be biocompatible, we really need to be thin, and we need to avoid the human body from the radiation of the antenna. You either use a ground plane, or you use structures like AMC. Unfortunately, I did not have time though, because I had the design which I showed you for a Canadian company. It's published actually now and also patented. That design, we use a AMC structure, artificial magnetic conductor, like a periodic structure which would avoid reflection and add in phase to the antenna. So that kind of structure you need to design. So substrate alone cannot stop the waves, unfortunately, going to the body. Right? I hope, Prabhat, I answered your question. Which substrate? Okay, I think I already answered that. Sir, restrictions of copper and Ag levels in transparent antennas due to their availability. Will you be interested with other metal mesh structures? Look, silver nanowires we have used in transparent antennas. So, actually, there's a paper in, I think, Nature Flexible. Again, I need to pick up the reference. We showed world record of transparency, optical transparencies versus conductivity for any printed ink. So, and I think we still hold that world record. Why the nanowires, the silver nanowires? By the way, probably many people you don't know, but silver nanowires also have some kind of biocompatibility as well, right? And when you make nanowires, their surface to volume ratio is huge, which means that they're long wires, but their diameter is very, very thin, nanometers, right? So because of that, you bring in transparency as well. The way we got the world record was by, we did a special process of welding through optical, like flash lamp. We UV source, we did welding of the nanowires internally in the solution, and we got very high conductivities. But I don't know, do not probably understand your question well. You said restriction of copper and Ag levels in transparent antennas due to their availability. I don't think so. There is any problem in their availability. Well, we grow our own nanowires, but you could buy nanowires. You could buy nanoparticles. You could buy silver nanoparticles. You could buy silver nanowires. You could buy copper nanoparticles. I do it in my lab, right? And if you want, I can give you some nanowires for free, just because you spent 2 hours with me on my talk. I'm just kidding. But anyways, will you be interested in other metal mesh structures? Sure. We can, but every metal, every ink which you make, there's a process. You have to optimize it for printing. There's a lot of experimentation, and then you need to have high performance. So we need to, because we have done this effort with the silver nanowires, and they're working well for us. Unless I have a reason or I have a problem to solve, or there's some very attractive metal, I would not waste another 6 months or two to make a new ink. But yes, copper inks are already there, silver inks are already there. We also made aluminum ink, not aluminum, alumina ink. So if there is interest, as I said, or a certain problem which I'm trying to solve, I'm open to work with other metals. Actually, I did a lot of work. I have a very, very good friend in Berkeley, Indian, Vivek Subramanian. This guy is a gem. He's a world authority on printed transistors. I did not show any work on transistors here or active because the time did not allow. But Vivek is my mentor or coach or whatever, say friend in the printed actives. He's recently moved to EPFL Switzerland for some time. But we have done some work with him, with my students in his lab, on zinc, zirconia. He likes to work with different materials as well, so he's more expert on that. But we've done some work on other metals as well. Okay, so I hope I answered that question. Can you put some light on the material choice for the chat is moving pretty fast. I'm reading any book. Material choice for polymer matrix in case of deposition modeling. So if I understand your question well, you are trying to say that if you want to mix the polymer and then you want to model it, right? Is that the question? If that's the question, this again really depends on your application. For example, we did for the magnetic material, I can tell you, we were doing iron oxide nanoparticles, and but we could not print the whole substrate because it was cracking and was not printing well. So we had to mix some polymer, namely SU8. I think we did various variations of varying, going from 10, 20 to 40%. And around 20 to 30% our substrate became fine. We lost a little bit of conductivity, but this really depends on your application. For example, now stretchable ink, the amount of stretch, if you need stretchability up to 20 to 30%, you mix that much amount of polymer and in that, and you do that not in the deposition stage. Actually, you do that in the ink making stage. Deposition stage is when the solution is completely made. I hope.
Atif sir, can you listen to me?
Yes.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Thank you for your illuminating presentation. It was really wonderful, the best presentation of this FDP so far.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You made my day.
And sir,
I
I
feel
have
happy.
one question to you. I have one
Yes.
question to you. That is, what are the practical applications of ultra wideband MIMO wearable antennas? Because there are some groups in India who are working on ultra wideband MIMO antennas over jeans substrate. I just want to know what are the applications or probable applications or future directions where wearable technology can be implemented using ultra wideband as well as MIMO technology. Thank you.
Look, ultra wideband and MIMO, both of them we know are the technologies for specific reasons. Ultra wideband is basically high data rates, and you know that we will in future will be transmitting high definition videos from one point to the other, from humans to humans, for let's say for autonomous cars, driverless cars, imaging videos. You want to watch your special shows on the go, high definition videos. Wearables will have visuals, videos. So ultra wideband, you need bandwidth to have these visuals or high definition videos or high data rate transmissions. Let's say if you have some kind of sensing which really requires quick turnaround times, like quick transmission of data, high amount of for let's say environmental monitoring and stuff like that. UV monitoring. In future, it is expected that humans will be wearing more than 100 sensors at any given point of time. Check John Rogers in Northeastern University. Great guy. Doing a pioneering work on these wearable sensors. Last time I met him in US, he was wearing himself 30 sensors at that point of time, and he was during the conference he was showing me moving his trouser up and moving his shirt right. Says this sensor I'm wearing for this sensor I'm wearing. So he's already using his sensors. So all of these sensors collecting information from the body, ECGs, all those requires high amount of data to be transmitted wirelessly. So you need bandwidth, and for that, MIMO and ultrawide. MIMO is multiple channels. So if you cannot send that amount of data through one channel, then you go to MIMO. See, these are parallel multiple channels. So I do see in the future that for wearable applications, there were hundreds of sensors, there's body area networks, and you would be sending a lot of information back and forth on the body. You would need these parallel channels, you would need these high bandwidths. Right? And I can tell you, you will be surprised. If you go to one of these conferences, let's say there are two versions. One is called LOPEC, LOPEC, which happens in Munich, Germany every year. This is the biggest printing conference in Europe and also in the world. And I regularly go there, and my students go there, we present there, and we also have a booth there sometimes. And the other is Printed Electronics Conference in US. If you go there, you will be surprised that companies I interact with over there who are not antenna companies. And they have antenna engineers and they're doing antenna work. Why? Because for example, Adidas and Nike. Adidas and have these wearable T-shirts already now, which have complete sensing wireless modules printed on them. You would see T-shirts which have complete wireless sensing modules, which athletes wear, and their activities are being monitored. This is huge. Companies, Under Armour, you could already see these. So you see non-traditional companies now doing this kind of RF antennas work. There's huge potential for the students actually. Trust me, my students who are graduating now with printing and antenna RF experience, they are finding it hard which job to accept. This student who has now defending today, Sue, she has multiple offers from Europe and Ireland, and she's having hard time. My previous student Shoaib has 6 offers. Previous students, Garrett is in US in a company. Benjamin I already told. These students were working on this combination of this unique expertise of printing and being able to do antenna designs and RF designs, understanding electromagnetics, doing applied electromagnetics designs, and also be able to handle printing, realizing these flexible antenna systems. They have a huge market, huge potential now. So emerging applications. Sorry, I went overboard with this answer, but I hope that I answered your question.